The first blow was with Schlag and a bright red spark gushed out. The bullet was shot out at super speeds that contained ferocious destructive power from the monster's weapon and straight towards its target. The bombardment of bullets specialized in penetration, which even pierced through Tio's breath from up front. As expected, Nointo decided to evade rather than using decomposition from her silver wings to stop it. She twisted her body as she fell, and while she avoided the bright red flash which went over right above her head, she rushed at Hajime at a dreadful speed. However, he read through her attack and had already placed crossbits in the way. They fired exploding slug bullets, and in the direct hit they released a roaring sound. Nointo noticed the bright red ripples coming from the exploding slug bullets. Did she consider that her silver wings wouldn't be in time? She used her large sword which she held in her hand to intercept them. The large sword was swung at godlike speeds. It abruptly cut through the bullets into two as if they were butter. What was decomposed was the magic power that was inside of the exploding slug bullets though. However, it wasn't possible for just a swing from a large sword to cut through everything. Bullets were shot from both the left and right sides and shock waves were released. Although its power has decreased, Nointo was exposed to a direct shockwave and momentarily her movements stopped. In front of her bosom was Hajime, who closed the distance within that instant. By using quake legs in the air through use of aerodynamic, he began compressing power into his left arm, oscillation pulverizer and the mechanic bursting shotgun. And with the full extent of his power, impact conversion was poured into Grand Arm and the huge magic was released. Nointo immediately used her two large swords as a shield. One of the large swords, at one point they started naming the swords, but it was too much of a pain. Loa was used to block the fist before the impact was fully released. She barely made it at the last second. She managed to stop Hajime's steel fist, however, she wasn't able to suppress its power. Gone. The colliding of metal resounded out with a terrible roar. Nointo was blown away by the intense force. Dope and tilde. Hajime didn't slack and continued his pursuit. Donner and Schlag was immediately pulled out and fired at maximum power. Two roaring explosions were heard. Two bright red flashes tore through the dark night. However, Nointo crossed both her swords as she blew off to take on a defensive stance, as there was going to be 12 impacts incoming. For each attack that Donner and Schlag shot, the fast attacks were only heard as one attack. With super pinpoint precision, every bullet landed in the same place. Simultaneously, Nointo groaned with every one of them. Her large swords trembled from the impacts and peaky and unpleasant sound was slightly heard. Hajime wondered to himself if he should feel amazed that the durability of the two large swords was able to withstand 12 railguns and his fist attack with his whole body put into it and still didn't break. She was blown away even further. Once again, Nointo was buried after destroying some facilities that were solemnly decorated by the church. Hajime took Horkon out of his treasure warehouse and launched all his rockets just in case. The group of rockets lit off sparks and dealt fatal wounds onto the building, which was on the verge of collapsing. The building collapsed completely along with a great explosion. It was wrapped up in great flames reaching 3000 degrees Celsius from the large amount of tar being stored inside the rockets. While looking at the great flames which dyed the night sky in red, Hajime still didn't loosen his guard yet. He reloaded rockets into Horkon from the treasure warehouse, and once again, he took aim at the mountain of rubble that was burning brightly. Then, at that moment, from below, right as Hajime jumped and looked down underneath him, the ground where he once stood had exploded before his eyes. Nointo flapped her silver wings and flew out of the hole. It appears that she managed to save herself from the rest of the assault by using magic to go underneath the ground. A large amount of silver feathers were shot out like a machine gun, and she also released her silver bombardment. They exchanged blows while swaying around like a blown leaf in the wind. She crossed her twin swords together, and from the small gap, a sword attack came through from the side and was warded off by the railgun. I think this sentence goes like this. Then Hajime launched missiles at Nointo. Nointo, who understood Horkon's power by experiencing it with her body, flew away quickly while releasing silver lights to get away from the pursuing missiles. While she released silver feathers to intercept the missile, she also created magic formations to launch magic attacks in fierce waves towards Hajime. Countless missiles were shot out and explosive flames in full bloom rained down from the night sky. Hajime put Horkon away and immediately pulled out Donner and Schlag again. He quickly shot through the core of the magic attacks that were heading at him, and Nointo similarly brought down all the missiles. A small silence came from the intervals of the fierce aerial battle. Nointo and Hajime were facing each other in the air. "Nae, I've got something I want to ask, will you hear me out for a bit?" "What is it?" "The Nina's coup invading the kingdom's capital shouldn't be unknown to the church." He was one-sidedly attacked without being able to ask his questions, so a temporary truce was given because Nointo decided to listen. It was the perfect time for Hajime to continue talking, the things that are happening on the ground. At this rate, wouldn't the kingdom fall into ruins? Next is obviously this, Kamiyama. Rather than waste your time fighting me, shouldn't you be fighting the Majinsoku? Hajime stated a reasonable question. However, Nointo snorted through her nose, conveying that it was a foolish question. If it comes to that, then that'll probably be the conclusion for this era. The end, as I thought. Ahito only sees humans as another person. We're only pieces for them to waste time on. By chance, the human beings were chosen for this era this time around? At the rate this is going, is Ahito on the Majinsoku god's side, or has he become their subordinate? If so, what are you going to do about it? No, I just thought I'd check up on the amount of credibility the Liberators' stories had. After all, to me, both sides are still just suspicious people. Nointo's eyebrow twitches when she heard that her master was called a suspicious person. However, Hajime didn't worry about it and continued talking with a smile. "Nae, if I'm in the way, why don't they just send me back to my former world? Also, the heroes as well. If the kingdom is to be wiped out already, wouldn't that mean that they didn't have much of a role at all?" "Your request is rejected, irregular." "Can I hear the reason?" "It's because the master wishes for it. The master desires your death, irregular. Eliminating all difficulties, obtaining immense power and strong comrades. And then, completely ruining the balance. My master absolutely wishes for your death. That's why, in a way that you'll suffer the most, lamenting your choices, then finally ending you while tasting regret and despair. To the maximum amount in order to give my master the highest delight possible." About the heroes. There was quite an elaborate and interesting idea. Rather, the masters become very interested. "Therefore, while you're still here as a piece, continue dancing around to please my master." Hajime wasn't worried at all and agreed within his mind. He shrugged his shoulders as the answer was roughly what he expected it to be after hearing what Mighty Raizen had told them before. In other words, those fellows were certainly trash. However, rather than himself, those last words made him anxious. "An interesting idea? It's not necessary for you to know, as you'll be dying very soon." The talk had ended. Nointo immediately shot out countless magics and silver feathers to resume the battle. Moreover, its power was on a whole different dimension from a while ago. The power that a single feather had was roughly comparable to the railguns, and every magic attack was near infinite levels of power. If you looked closely, every part of Nointo's body was clad in silver magic, and it came with an overwhelming intimidation. It looked just like the limit breakthrough that Hajime and Kuki used. While holding his breath against the extreme waves of attacks that consisted of overwhelming power, Hajime held Metsurai in his right hand and Schlagen in his left and continued to fight back. Metsurai roared and shot out 12,000 bullets per minute, which completely negated the silver feathers and magic attacks. Meanwhile, Schlagen's bullets pierced through in a single file line towards Nointo. However, Nointo's movements while clad in the silver light was incomparable to what it was before. The moment Schlagen's bright red bombardment pierced through Nointo, her body vanished like haze and appeared several meters away. Nointo had caused a mirage of afterimages due to her sheer speed of dodging the bullet, and her body continued to slightly blur as Hajime read ahead. "I don't know if this is supposed to actually be a skill or not, however it was in quotes. If it is, then I probably could have named it foresight? And used crossbits to shoot exploding slug bullets." However, once again they only shot through her afterimage. Nointo, who completely disappeared, Zaza created afterimages in the next instant and appeared behind Hajime. And like a spinning top, she swung her twin large swords and spun along with its centrifugal force that contained immense power. Nointo's last movements far exceeded Hajime's perception with light speed active. It was a complete surprise attack. Though he just barely managed to lean his body back to avoid a direct hit, Schlagen, which was used as a shield, was cut into two. Its built-in energy discharged by accident, and a huge explosion erupted in between Hajime and Nointo that momentarily caused Nointo to delay her pursuit. However, it allowed Hajime enough time to counterattack. Hajime's body became clad in bright red magic. He had used limit breakthrough towards Nointo, who was advancing. Hajime also advanced a step. Metsurai was no longer in his hands, instead he held onto Donner and Schlag. From that point on it was going to be super close combat. Suitilda. Ha tilde. Immediately after Hajime dodged the half-swung large sword, both large swords were swung at his body with exquisite timing. Using Schlag, he repelled one sword by shooting a railgun at its center, and the other was deflected with the upper side of its barrel. Donner in his right hand was aimed directly at Nointo's heart. A bright red flash shot out, but Nointo dodged while rotating and left an afterimage. With its momentum, she swung her large swords with increased power in order to oppose the decomposition. Hajime applied a heavy concentration of intensive strengthening from Vajra onto Schlag, which was several times its normal density. Rather than going against the full brunt of the attack, he used Schlag to deflect the first sword upwards and towards the second large sword that was swung horizontally. He received its blade with the muzzle while still clad in intensive strengthening from Vajra and fired as. With a flash of light, an explosion sounded out and the second large sword flew away. They were both within point-blank distance, and while dodging and diverting their opponent's weapons, they forgot to breath as their fierce attacks continued without being able to deal a fatal blow. Tilde. Ha tilde. Unaware, Hajime and Nointo began to shout out one tendon or a nerve line. With just one misstep, death would settle in at the next moment. There was no time to pay attention to each other's attacks. They only relied on their experiences and instincts while swinging their sword and firing their guns, which shaved off their lives a little bit at a time. The silver sword left a trail of light through the dark night, and the bright red flash flew in all directions like blood spraying. If both attacks were being compared to the sun, their storm of attacks would be considered a flare. In 1 second, in order to continue surviving, they dodged each other's attacks and their speeds rose without bounds in proportion. If they were slightly grazed, blood would be stained everywhere. Hajime had shallow cuts everywhere on his body. Nointo was dripping blood from where she was gouged. Hajime and Nointo's abilities were equal. The way things were going, the battle of offense and defense was thought to continue on for eternity. However, Hajime was being cornered. No, to be accurate, he was going to be cornered. Hajime had already understood. Because none of Nointo's magical power has been consumed since the start of the battle, needless to say, Hajime had a time limit on using limit breakthrough. It'll forcefully cancel itself and leave him in a weakened state for a while. Although Hajime's magical power was huge, it wouldn't be able to keep up indefinitely. On the other hand, Nointo was apparently gaining a supply of magical power from somewhere else, which allowed her to continue her strengthening and was virtually unrestricted. Hajime's magic eye was shining brightly. He was able to see that something similar to a magic stone was lodged into Nointo's heart. Hajime decided that if things stayed the way they were, he'd gradually be beaten, be blown away. Dodo. Simultaneously with the shout, Hajime had the crossbits fire exploding slug bullets while he was still within the blast's vicinity. Have you gone mad? Nointo's inorganic eyes slightly opened widely. Her eyes carried a color of doubt which questioned Hajime's sanity. Dozens of exploding slug bullets were shot out by the 6 crossbits immediately and made countless ripples centering around Hajime and Nointo. Nointo wrapped her silver wings around her body at once, and Hajime also used Vajra to its maximum output. Immediately following that, a bright red flower of light bloomed above in the night sky. Needless to say, the immense shockwave blew away Hajime and Nointo. It was a terrifying shockwave. It pierced through Vajra and caused quite a bit of damage to Hajime's body. As evidence, Hajime was grandly spraying blood everywhere. He was covered in wounds. Nointo didn't get away free of harm either, because she couldn't wrap herself on time. She was also gushing with wounds and she coughed out blood as well. It seems that the impact reached her internal organs. Were you going for a double suicide? Suiciding with you? That's a harsh joke. Only say those lines if you're a good woman and my lover. Nointo unintentionally had eyes of doubt from the rash attack. Hajime replied jokingly while breathing roughly. It had a hint of ridicule for wanting to be together with her as a friend for their last moments. Improvised. Don't actually get this sentence? Hajime then took out a new weapon from the treasure warehouse. And then he threw out cards which flew at high speed soundlessly. You would likely lose sight of it if you weren't paying attention, even though it should be there. However, Nointo hit them away as if they were nothing with her large sword. Cockintilda. A rough sound resounded, while spinning around in the air, a injetsu ring, donut-shaped disc about 15 centimeters in diameter, or a throwing weapon called a chakram. Now this. Have you run out of? Dopen. 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 Towards the primitive weapons, Nointo had slightly relaxed her guard towards Hajime. Railguns shot out from Hajime's right and left hands immediately afterwards. Bright red flashes of light appeared on Nointo's left and right side. Who was facing Hajime? Her head would be crushed by the assault. Nointo couldn't release her words due to the impossible situation. She immediately positioned her twin large swords by her side as shields. All 12 bullets that were discharged by Donner and Schlag were exploding bullets. And just like before, they were pinpoint accuracy attacks. Why did the bullets shoot out from completely different directions and had Nointo pincered? That was because of the Injetsu rings that Hajime threw out earlier. The Injetsu rings had sign interception and air claws built into them through generation magic. Although they're a stealthy and assassination-type throwing weapon, more than that, it was an artifact with a special effect. Its gate function was what made it possible to kill the Cleone, the immortal monster at Marugin Undersea Ruins. In other words, the vacant hole in the Injetsu ring is directly connected to the same space with the other Injetsu rings. If you shot a bullet through it, it'll jump through space and appear out from the hole of another Injetsu ring. Of course, he's also able to remotely control them, just like the crossbits protecting her head were her twin large swords. The exploding bullets that calculated Nointo's every move jumped through space. Every bullet left no gaps and reached their intended targets. A terrific shock wave surged out in the next instant. Bakin tilde. Bakin tilde. Along with the sounds, Nointo's large swords broke down from the middle. Nah. Why, from just this much? Though she said that, there was no feelings in her voice. However, Nointo was openly surprised. However, she herself probably didn't notice. After Hajime released the first pinpoint shots, ever since they were in the middle of their extreme close combat battle, he had continued to aim all impacts towards the crack that had appeared on Nointo's large sword rather than at her actual body. Simply because they were equal in ability, he was waiting for the chance that would come along with breaking her weapon. Hajime certainly didn't miss the chance that Nointo gave him. He took out a new artifact from his treasure warehouse and threw it continuously. Nointo had no time to dodge the 10 artifacts that were thrown out at high speeds. At once, she tried to fend them off with her broken large swords. However, that was a bad move against this artifact. What was thrown out were round oars with wires attached to them. It was a capturing tool called the bola, which was commonly known as a throwing weapon. Usually, after hitting its target, with enough centrifugal force it'll start rotating. Because it had built-in induction stones, it could easily achieve enough speed when thrown immediately. And naturally, the thing that Hajime created was not just a simple bola. This is, I can't move. The handles of Nointo's large swords, both her arms, waist, and feet were entangled by the bola. Meanwhile, the spherical oars produced a ripple as they floated in the air. That was due to the effect of space magic, which was created through generation magic. The weights are fixed into space itself. Thus the captured object is also fixed in place in the first place. Nointo had the decomposition ability, so he had less than 10 seconds before she manages to actually break free. Moreover, it wasn't possible to restrain her wings because they were composed of her magic, so she would probably just reuse her magic to create new ones. As things stand, the silver wings will likely remove the constraints fairly easily, but Hajime's aim is only several few seconds. A one-hit kill. The strongest possible blow that he could dish out in these few seconds. Hajime pulled out a large cylinder weapon which measured up to 2 meters in length from his treasure warehouse. It was the pile bunker. Kai 5 tilde. Letting out a particular sound and charged with bright red thunder sparking out. Then, he charged straight towards Nointo. Ku. Nointo leaked out a bitter voice and wrapped herself with her silver wings like a cocoon. Silver magic containing decomposition shone out brightly. It looked exactly like a moon. Hajime slammed pile bunker directly into that beauty and created a terrific shockwave. Immediately after that, its newly added space fixation function activated and 4 arms appeared. Pile bunker was fixed in place while going against the decomposition. The bright red sparks were already at critical stages and rampaged intensely. Endure it if you can. Hajime's lips were smiling fearlessly and his eyes were glaring with murderous intent. The bright red magical power of limit breakthrough shined more and more. Soon the silver moon was completely dyed into a bright red moon. Afterwards, an invisible impact surged out from the pile bunker's exit hull. It was the function which caused space vibrations built into the exit hull. It was a simplified version of the space magic tremble heaven. It shot a fierce vibration towards the target. The combination caused the target's durability to decrease drastically, and along with gravity magic at the moment of the impact, The jet black stake increased its weight up to 20 tons and was released with a roaring sound like a thunder dog tilde. At zero distance with explosive charge that was compressed in shock wave conversion magic, the stake made of xanthium drilled down in godlike speeds of acceleration due to the electromagnetic induction, and it completely destroyed its prey. The jet black stake released bright red sparks and easily pierced through the two silver wings. It penetrated through Nointo's heart and still continued further. It went straight through her body and tore off a wing from its root. Then, just like a meteor, it flew away into the distance while emitting a red trail. What remained was Nointo's figure with a hole literally opened at the place where her magical power supply source was. Blood probably didn't spill out because the wound was completely charred by thunderclad. It was just a body with a hole punctured in its chest, which makes it not feel human at all. The eyes that peeped out were cold and mechanical as ever, and the silver wings dispersed into the air. It was simply still. Hajime seemed to have some mixed feelings about the reproachful atmosphere. While looking at Nointo's eyes, it quickly lost its light and became hollow. While tilting a little, her body fell down onto a remote hillside nearby the church's building. On the surface of the dark mountain, Nointo's silver glow shined brightly. When Hajime got down by her side, he pulled out Donner and aimed it at her head. Although his magic eye and his perception system ability showed that Nointo was definitely dead, he felt uneasy unless he shot a bullet into her head. It was a nasty habit of his at the moment when Hajime was about to pull the trigger on Donner. Tilde. A huge explosion roared out and caused Kamiyama to shake severely. The spectacle that greeted Hajime's eyes when he looked back was the church and its cathedral collapsing while a huge mushroom cloud formed from it with a roaring sound. "No way," Hajime's unintentional mutter echoed out rather clearly.